Jenni Carlson. Welcome to the Jenni and Barry Show. An impressive Game 1 victory is in the books for the Thunder. Oklahoma City led Dallas the entire second half Tuesday night, and in the fourth quarter, the Thunder never led by less than 10. So, what did the opening game of this Western Conference semifinal tell us? We'll talk about that and much more. But first, we want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Barry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, Two Fellows Movers, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to our podcast, please do so on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button. It's easy, doesn't take much from you, but it really helps us. So subscribe today. Well, here we are on the Jenni and Barry Show, and that's not Barry. That's Mike Sherman, ladies and gentlemen. Mike, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Happy to be here with you, Jenni, and happy Willis Reed Day to all who observe.
And there you go.
That's my Willis Reed autograph. As you know, in 1970, Willis Reed limped onto the court in a Knicks-Lakers playoff game, played a few minutes, and went down in history of sports heroics for just getting out there. Of course, never mind the fact that Walt Frazier had 36 and 19, and he was the real reason he won. They don't call it Walt Frazier Day; they call it Willis Reed Day, which is good for me because I don't have Willis Reed's autograph.
Well, you know, it's we saw some injuries, nothing to Willis Reed's extent in Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals between the Thunder and the Mavs. Saw some hobbling around by some of the Thunder stars, but you know, this was not a hobbling game for the Thunder. They came out strong. So let's talk about this. Is it time to have a little overreaction Wednesday, Sherm? Thunder, 7 games better than Dallas in the regular season, now 22 points better than the Mavs on Tuesday night. Are we seeing a Western Conference equivalent to Minnesota-Denver? Is this series driving down T-Wolves-Nuggets Boulevard after what we saw Game 1?
There you go. Keeping it real by channeling Barry Trammell, the Minnesota-Denver Boulevard, as he would say. They're driving that. I'm going to, if we declare this overreaction Wednesday, which I need a little overreaction just to kind of get the biorhythms and the energy going, I'm going to say there's tendencies. Yes, Jenni, there is a lot of signs. When your stars are better than their stars, and your bench is a lot better than their bench, you start to wonder. When Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is dragging his leg to fake people and to pivot, and Luka Donic is dragging his leg just to get up court, those are not good signs for the Mavericks. Game 1 could not have gone better for the Thunder. Could not. I'm trying to imagine an outcome that would be better. Maybe no Jalen Williams hobbling at halftime. We're going to pick this. Maybe Gordon Hayward's one shot had gone in.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to overreact to, especially since we had just witnessed 2 nights of the Timberwolves dismantling the reigning NBA champions. So there's a little bit of that in this game.
Yeah. You know, obviously Luka Doncic is, you know, he's out there. He's still going to be dangerous, but he's clearly not 100%. I mean, he just doesn't have the explosiveness. Got to the rim a couple times last night. You know, really, I think both times he had sort of switches on matchups that he felt like he could exploit. He did. He got to the rim, but you could see a lot more of that out of him. I think if he was healthy, he just doesn't seem to be healthy as much. Now, Kyrie, there's nothing wrong as far as, you know, it's just a regular game. You know, everybody's not 100% after a long season, you know, this far into the playoffs. Everybody's going to be more tired, more hurt, more bumps, more bruises. But to me, the Thunder just has lots more answers for those guys. And I'm not talking about what they do on the offensive end, which you're right, Sherm. I wrote about that, how, everybody came into this series talking about Kyrie and Luka for great reason. They're top shelf scorers, but lo and behold, the Thunder reminded everybody they got a couple of those guys too. But the answers to me are more on the defensive end. You know, they have a lot of bodies they can throw at those guys. And even though they got into some foul trouble with Dort, they still had more people they could throw out there. To me, that was eye-opening, that there are defensive things that the Thunder can do, and I'm just not sure the Mavs have those options with their defense.
I know that we have a Dort appreciation segment built into every episode.
As we should.
Every story, every post, every email newsletter, as it should be for Sellout Crowd. And I don't want to tiptoe into that. But, as I was tracking the game last night, Jenni, when Dort went out, there is a tendency to expect catastrophe.
Yeah.
Like, hope. That means that Doncic or Kyrie Irving are not on the court. What's going to happen here? It happened at the end of the first half when he sat down, I think, with his third foul.
Right.
The lead grew.
Yeah.
They actually grew the lead from, I think, 4 points to 9 or something like that.
Led by 9 at half, yeah.
Yeah. And then he went down. And then when he got his fifth foul, you're thinking, okay, this is the opportunity. But by then, both doors one of the doors had been blown off of the Mavericks, and then the second door came off during that stretch. That was a command performance by the defense. It looked to me, Jenni, that Doncic wasn't just going to the rim. He kind of wanted to go get in the rim, sort of do that slow down turtle dribble thing or crab dribble, and then kick it out. But every time he tried to do that, I looked up, there were 3 Thunder players around him with their hands out.
Yeah.
So he couldn't really see the rim. He couldn't see the open passing lanes. He wasn't doing the pivot thing that Shea does so well. They had a really great game one approach to him. I know it's a long series, and we'll see how things feel. But kudos to Mark Daigneault and his staff for the way they really pinched Luka Donic last night.
Yeah, they talked defensively about putting guys like him in a crowd, and I think we saw that. Now, there are some trade-offs that have to happen or do often happen, and lots of times that's corner threes. And we did see the Mavs have some corner threes that were wide open. We saw them make some of those corner threes. Obviously, that's not what you want, but that tends to be not Kyrie and not Luka in those corner three situations. Now, you can lose with somebody else hitting a corner three just as bad as you can lose with Luka or Kyrie getting cooking. But I think that getting the ball out of those guys' hands is the preference. I think figuring out ways to either make them take tough shots or pass out and give it to somebody else. They're going to make them occasionally. I think they had 4 or 5 corner threes, but I think the Thunder did adjust to that a little bit. We saw some really wide open corner threes in the first quarter, maybe even into the second quarter. But I really thought that they figured some things out to try to limit that a little bit more as the game went on. Now, that the Mavs are going to adjust. There's no doubt they're going to adjust. But can they do enough to, open some of those things up? I think Maxi Kleber being out is something we haven't talked a ton about. But as Mark Daigneault pointed out the other day, he played 22 minutes in the first round for the Mavs. A guy who plays 22 minutes and is suddenly gone, that's no small thing. So I think having more outside options to pass to, that's one less for Luka on those drives, one less for Kyrie. So, I think and he's not coming back this series. There's no way he plays. So the Mavs are without him and they're going to have to make up for it. Thunder defense, this is another playoff game, 5 playoff wins for the Thunder. If we want to overreact, this may be the reason to overreact, Sherm. 5 playoff games, all wins by this youngest ever top-seeded Thunder team, and they have yet to let an opponent get to 100 points. That's impressive.
Yeah, I had 2 thoughts based on what you said. Number one, Jenni, the Thunder knows what problems it wants. It really does. In fact, sometimes I listen to Daigneault and I'm like, this is sort of a TED Talk as much as it is a pregame media scrum. Yesterday, I think he said to Joel from the Oklahoman, Joel said, "Do you regret something or another?" And Mark Daigneault said, "Joel, living with regrets is no way to go through life." So, the Thunder actually knows what problems it wants.
Yeah.
And it doesn't want the problem of Luka Doncic going off right now at the rim. And so it's willing to live. It knows Kleba is not there to stretch the court and pull one of the larger Thunder players away from the basket.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Daniel Gafford. It's Daniel Gafford. It's Derek Lively. That's their bigs for this series. And neither of those guys are great at the 3-point line.
Yeah.
So they've adjusted. And Thunder knows what problems it wants, and it's addressing them. The second part of this defensive approach is, you remember, I think Scott Brooks or Kevin Durant or those guys used to talk about playing on a string. This is something this is not a metaphor that the current version of Thunder uses a lot, but these guys do it extremely well. The rotations are unbelievable. The effort is unbelievable. There wasn't a lot of breathing room for Dallas last night. Yeah. And the folks who were open, as my high school coach used to say to me, whenever I told him why I took an ill-advised shot, I said, I was open. He used to say, there's a reason you're open. So the guys that were open, mostly there were reasons why the Thunder left them open.
Yeah, and it felt like, in sort of reading body language, that you could sort of sense that Luka and Kyrie had that feeling of, these guys around us are going to have to offensively be a lot better against this team. I think that you could sort of sense, like, they knew that this is going to be a lot of heavy lifting by them. And those guys, if they're off, the whoever else is out there with them, it's going to be hard for them to score enough against this Thunder defense, because this Thunder offense, it can get cooking. It can have waves and runs like it did last night with SGA in the third, Jalen Williams in the fourth. We'll talk some more about that in a second. But before we get too far away from the defense, it is time for the Lu Dort appreciation segment. So,
there ought to be some sort of music that plays when that happened for that.
Isn't it like, it has to be some sort of superhero music, right? I mean, Lu Dort, flies in with his, cape waving in the back, and
something breaking, like the plates crashing together.
Yeah. Well, for me, the play of the night was, in my mind, was Lu Dort on Luka, well beyond the 3-point line. He pokes the ball away, dives on the floor to save it, to corral it, then passes it out, and it becomes a transition fast break dunk by Jalen Williams. To me, that was one of those moments that, Luka's not in a mode where he's attacking. He's not yet initiated what he wants to do. He's just trying to be for just a second. And Lu Dort says, you know what? Now's the time. I'm going to dive in there, get this ball, and we're going the other way. I really thought that was, I thought that was the biggest play of the night. I think it was really a trendsetter, a mood setter. I can't think Luka was really all that fired up about it, but they did switch a little bit more than I thought, and the other guys did really well. But still, that Lu Dort defense is so critical in this series. We saw it in game one. He was great again.
You took my answer, and it's really probably the only logical answer, but there's two things about that play. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's a 2-point game right before that happens. Mm-hmm. And the Thunder's 9-point halftime lead had started to evaporate. There was they had come out with a timeout not long before that. Dort hit a 3-pointer right before that. Yeah. And then to come down, and they always used to say that guys play harder on the defensive end after watching the ball go in the basket. I don't think Lu Dort needs that. I think, and so that the time frame, what was bracketed by that play was important. That the Mavericks had gotten within striking distance again. He had just hit a 3. And, Lu Dort doesn't grab a ball on the ground and then start calling timeout, to avoid a tie-up. First of all, nobody's diving on top of Lu Dort, especially Luka Doncic, to try to wrestle the ball from him. Did you notice that the Mavs don't get on the ground quite as much as the Thunder or Lu Dort does?
Yeah.
So that was beautiful, and that was just a beautiful hustle play. That's the kind of play that will wind up on some sort of pregame video, will wind up mural in the Thunder practice facility, maybe on top of a skyscraper or a brick mural downtown. It's just a signature play. But there were others.
Right. There was a moment, speaking of others, there was a moment, I can't remember at what point. I could go back in my notes and find it later, but Luka Doncic has the ball. He's coming down court. He looks like he's in attack mode. Lu Dort, for reasons I'm not sure right now, was not directly on Luka. And Luka finds a way to split the defenders on the perimeter, the guys that sort of converged on him. He comes through the split, and where I was sitting, I got a great viewpoint of this. And you could almost feel him like, oh my gosh, I'm in the open. And almost the exact same moment, diving in from the top of the key to pick him up is Lu Dort. And there was almost like it just stopped him in his tracks because he thinks I'm free. And then Lu Dort's right there. But, Lu Dort, big moments that will not be in box scores like that, like tipping out rebounds. I thought Lu Dort was fantastic again last night. 2
big rebound tip outs that I remember, just to keep the ball alive on a team that you say, hey, they struggle on the boards. Right. So he didn't get a rebound on that, but he kept it alive. And then he drew 2 illegal screen fouls again, going over. So there's just he's such a wonderful player for so many reasons. And Luka Doncic had the Brandon Ingram resting you-know-what face last night.
Yeah.
He did. He had that face that Brandon Ingram has. Brandon Ingram is the Pelicans and the side. The Pelicans have decided they're not going to offer Brandon Ingram a contract. And for that, his agent says, thanks a lot, Dort.
Yeah. How about we go to the Eastern Conference, Brandon Ingram says. Why don't we get away from this guy?
Yeah.
It's interesting. They handed out the Defensive Player of the Year award on Tuesday night before the game, and it went to Rudy Gobert, who's obviously a fantastic defender. We all know that. But, it's going to be interesting to see as these years go on if Lu Dort is able to percolate up in that voting. He's not – a lot of times those Defensive Player of the Year awards go to big guys. And, obviously Victor Wembanyama is now lurking and doing his thing. And defensively, he's going to have great numbers. But I wonder how much these playoff games and Lu Dort doing what Lu Dort does that change the conversation? Dort didn't even get any votes in the Defensive Player of the Year. 0. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is also a really good defensive player, he got a vote or 2, I think 2 second-place votes. But to me, if you ask anybody on the Thunder who's the best defensive player on this team, everybody knows it's Lu Dort. And I think that now maybe that is being revealed to the entire basketball world. So it's going to be interesting to see what does that look like? I know that's not why Lu Dort does what he's doing by any stretch. That's not what he's doing it for. But it's going to be fascinating to see how those ripples, impact things down the road with things like Defensive Player of the Year.
There's a factor here that I'm going to bring up a little bit later, but it's that the voters don't watch the games. They don't. They're not watching Dort play night to night.
Well, that's true.
There's no way he gets shut out, and it's impossible for anybody to watch night to night. But the Thunder's visibility this season on the national stage has not been great. The league's TV schedule didn't anticipate first seed in the Western Conference, 57 wins. It forecasts something else, and Dort's vote totals are a direct result of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think these playoff games, when people are watching, I think that will help Lu Dort. I think in the same way, may help Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being on the same floor as Luka Doncic. People can see, that guy's pretty special. So I don't know if that wins him an MVP in the future, but I think that's one of those things that reputations are built in the playoffs. And if you can build a good one, those 2 guys are. That's a positive. Another guy building a reputation, Jalen Williams, the Santa Clara second-year man. Is there some sort of pattern here to what he does, Sherm? Is it all about saving it for when it really counts? He had 4 consecutive possessions in the fourth quarter where he scores 10 points. He had a 10-3 run on his own against the Mavericks, and during that stretch, unbelievable shot making, playmaking by him. Jalen Williams' star continues to rise, but man, he was huge there in that fourth quarter.
I don't have the stats. We're talking anecdotal, but from watching this team this season, that just seems like there's a trademark fourth quarter burst in which he detonates a three-pointer, he throws down an improbable dunk, he pokes the ball away from someone, and last night it was more pronounced, mostly because of his 2 for 10 shooting until that explosion, right?
Yeah,
I think he was 2 for 10 and then 4 or 5 shooting, and he had the unsung job of chasing Kyrie Irving around a lot.
Yeah,
and so I think maybe that's what they told him. We don't really know what trade-offs are being made. Sometimes we attribute good game, bad game. The guy got off to a slow start, but we couldn't take our eyes off Doncic and Dort long enough to see over here who is harassing Kyrie Irving into a least productive night. And I got to credit Jalen Williams with some of that. Last night I didn't even know, is he wearing matching shoes again, or is it still with the odd shoes?
No, he actually last night he wore his shoe, his version of the I can't remember which shoe it is. I'm probably all the sneakerheads out there yelling at their screen right now. Sorry, I forget what he wears from Adidas, but they're his own version. They're mismatched. Now he said he blew out a couple of parts of his shoe last night after the game, so played right out of his shoes, I guess. I don't know when he changed or how that all worked, but he said he busted him a couple of times. Now back to what you were saying about his defense on Kyrie. He was struggling early. Now I thought Shea was as well, but those guys in the first half, even though they were missing shots, get to the free throw line. That's important. But also they were missing shots that they normally make. It wasn't like they were taking bad shots or out of character shots. I thought Jalen Williams got shots early that he wanted to get. He just didn't knock them down. But then in the fourth quarter, he was knocking him down. He was cold-blooded during that stretch in the fourth quarter. But he made a good point in the post game. He said that he couldn't really get hung up on those misses because he had to run back down to the other end and try to stop Kyrie Irving. So there's not a whole lot of time to pout when you got to get back and start defending one of the great scorers in basketball. So it really kind of, kept him from fixating on not making shots. And then when time came, it was scoring time is J-Dub time. So he was fantastic again. When they needed it, when they really needed to just kind of stretch out that lead, go from, I think it was about 10 points when he hit his first basket, stretches it out to 17 points by the time he hits that fourth of 4 in a row. So, just really, really taking control of the game when, it's not impossible to think the Mavs could swing it back to a 2-possession game or something like that. That reality seemed far gone by the time Jalen Williams drove the baseline, got that dunk. It was kind of that exclamation mark for me in the fourth quarter with him.
It was another fun performance, another barking. On television, Ian Eagle thought he referenced a couple. I wrote this down, now I forget it. Which barking? Arsenio Hall, the Arsenio Hall show.
Oh my gosh!
For all the youngsters out there, there used to be this comedian named Arsenio Hall, and he used to have.
You're old without saying you're old. Reference the Arsenio Hall show.
Yeah, the late night Arsenio Hall, and when he came out, people barked. That's what that was Ian Eagle's reference. Not even Who Let the Dogs Out. I mean,
no.
He went to Arsenio. So anyway, good for Ian.
Yeah. Well, hey, obviously big games, big moments by Jalen Williams, by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We didn't see the big moments from Josh Giddey. He obviously had huge moments in that first round series against the Pelicans, but he was more limited in this one, Sherman. I felt like that was necessary. I don't know what his role is going to be in this series, but I definitely felt like early in the second half, when he came out of the halftime locker room, was part of that group to start, and we saw the Mavs go on a run, cut the lead down to 1, I think it was. I thought that the offense got sticky. I thought that there was just not the movement, not the free flowing that we'd seen with Aaron Wiggins on the court in the first half, with Cason Wallace on the court in the first half. I'm not saying that's all a Giddey thing, but they subbed him out, brought Isaiah Joe in after the Mavs had cut that lead to 1, and the offense immediately started looking and feeling different. Didn't have that ball sticking, not moving. So I think there's a place for Josh Giddey. I just don't know how much he's going to be able to play in this series, quite honestly.
You're going to have to excuse me. I don't think I heard anything you said after you said Aaron Wiggins. I have something for you. Hold on one second.
Okay. Jeez. You want to sing that? You want to sing the Maryland fight song while we're at it? Oh no. I know you're trying to play it. I can't hear it very well. You're going through a tunnel.
Go Terps.
Oh, brother. He was great. They got to play Aaron Wiggins. To me, that's an obvious. Got to get Aaron Wiggins on the court. More than, I'm sorry, Josh Giddey, you had great moments in that first series, but I just don't think this is a Josh Giddey series.
Are you saying you couldn't hear my fight song? We're having technical difficulties?
I think it was drowned out. Yeah, or maybe I chose not to hear it. I don't know.
Okay. All right. I can sing it if you like.
That's quite all right.
Also, I might point out that Maryland's got 3 fight songs. Me and Aaron Wiggins need to get together and sing them all together. One of them, unfortunately, is sung to the melody of "Oh Christmas Tree." And my getup right now, I'm very Christmassy with the red and the green. I just want to say what a wonderful player Aaron Wiggins is. If someone wants to christen this, write down the date, May 7th, 2024, as the Aaron Wiggins game. That'd be fine by me and everybody who loves the Terps. I would just say this, no Giddey, no problem. They got options.
Yeah.
The Thunder has so many options. Giddey got popped in the mouth. Giddey actually put up a pretty good defensive fight.
I agree.
And so he wasn't all that productive on offense. He tried to take the ball to the hole a couple times. He was part of that early game, there's a lid on the basket, thing where they were trying to attack the basket and it wasn't falling. And the Thunder, in a way, just kind of went away from him. Yeah. They just said, hey, listen, you get on the defensive end. We've got this. They had so many other options. We mentioned Aaron Wiggins. We mentioned Cason Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make any mistakes. 0, is always in the right place, is always crowding and taking away floor space. Isaiah Joe, not just a pretty shooter, and so they had so many options to throw at the Mavericks perimeter guys. Somebody was talking about Big Game Giddey it seems like a week ago when they last played, when they clinched the closeout game of the Pelicans. He had a big game, but not last night. And I don't know if that portends a bad series for him, but I do know this, and it's not just my Maryland heart aching for this. More Aaron Wiggins, more Aaron Wiggins. Those 7 minutes that Gordon Hayward got, I know where they can go. I have a plan for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, great minutes by Aaron Wiggins off the bench. Isaiah Joe, you mentioned it. Cason Wallace, we'll get to him in just a second. But yeah, I thought the bench was big. And, this Thunder team before this series started looked like it had a big depth advantage. Obviously, the injury to Maxi Kleba is big. I mean, they are missing some pieces, but I do think that the Thunder bench, not only do they have more options, Jalen Williams, Arkansas Jalen Williams comes in, gives some really good minutes too. Those guys are, sort of Swiss Army knife-like. It's not just a shooter you're putting in. You mentioned Isaiah Joe. He's way better defensively, I think, than I ever thought he would be when they first acquired him. Yes, he's a great shooter, but he's capable defensively. He's not going to get you absolutely torched. So to me, they've got more guys off the bench who can do more things. And that is that means more levers for Mark Daigneault to pull. He even said last night that they put some, got Jalen Williams in there to play some minutes down in the paint because they just wanted to see what it looked like. This is the first game of the Western Conference semifinals, and they just want to see what it looks like, see how it goes. I'm like, holy cow, these guys are still in, trial and error experiment mode, but that's what they've always done, is figure out, what does this look like now in case we need to use this down the line. So, kudos to Mark Daigneault, kudos to the bench for figuring out, ways to plug in, improving their game, not standing still. Lots to like about what those guys did last night.
They're a team that's capable of dictating matchups from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
The old Thunder, the first generation of this, the two superstars were dictating weird matchups. You couldn't handle Russ with your typical 1 or 2 guard, and you couldn't handle Durant. You didn't know who, 3, 4, 5, who's going to guard Durant. But the rest of the team didn't present as many matchups. Serge was tough. He drew people away from the basket. But everybody on this team who sets foot on the court creates an either-or option. They don't. Everyone. I guess Gordon Hayward would be the exception. But Isaiah Joe is going in and rebounding. Aaron Wiggins is hitting threes or cutting to the basket. Or everybody. All those role players are matchup problems.
Yeah.
And it's not 3-dimensional chess. It's multi-dimensional chess. And, it's just a splendor of the roster that they've put together. It's just a kudos to Sam Presti and his scouting staff, this roster, and Mark Daigneault and coaching staff for how they deploy it. It's the beautiful basketball that we used to sit there and watch the Golden State Warriors play is now right down the street at Paycom.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, one of those guys we talked about a second ago, Cason Wallace. Interesting side note, and you brought this up, Sherm. I'd forgotten about this, but when Cason Wallace is drafted, not even a year ago, he's actually drafted on draft night by the Mavericks. And Derek Lively is drafted by the Thunder, and because the NBA is goofy on draft night, they wore those hats, even though when those picks were made, everybody knew that they were going to go the opposite way. Davis Bertans was going to come from Dallas to Oklahoma City in the deal, but Cason Wallace wore that Mavs hat on draft night. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, but Derek Lively fits in great with the pick and roll that the Mavs want to do. But I don't think, in my mind, nobody's saying, hey, wait, I wish we could go back, and the way that they were wearing those hats on draft night is the way that we wish they were still associated. Cason Wallace is a perfect Lou Dort, clone off the bench. Not quite as big, not quite as good yet, but that guy is a spectacular rookie. Remember, rookie, first-year guy out there doing what he did. Really, really strong when you think about, less than a year ago, how things were going for this guy.
So the hat dance that the NBA goes through, I don't know if it's a CBA thing. I don't know if it's a TV thing or an ESPN thing or whatever. The NFL manages to get it right. The NFL announces there's a trade. Dun, 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 dun. That's they say there's been a trade, and then some little kid or former player or hero from one of our wars comes out and announces that the player, and then they get the hat right. They have a hat guy that says, hey, put the hat on and get the right hat on. Make sure it's the right one. Look at yourself. The NBA, no. They just go up there, and so we have all these weird it's not the weirdest one of draft night. There's way weirder one than this. But here they are in this matchup. And given the Thunder too small, need to get bigger at the trade deadline. They didn't get bigger. All the hand-wringing over that. It's natural to look at these two players and say, well, he could have been in Dallas. He's from Dallas. And he could have been in the Thunder because the Thunder loves Duke players. Kyle Singler. Traded for Kyle Singler. So, but that didn't happen. And Lively has been really good, but he wasn't as lively last night. -13. All the minuses were bad for Dallas all the way around. Cason Wallace, +13. on the plus minus. I'm not beholden to the plus minus thing unless it involves Aaron Wiggins, who, by the way, was plus 18 in 23 minutes. But Cason Wallace is always where you need him to be. The way the Thunder wants to play, it works. And so what's going to be interesting, Jenni, I think from Cason Wallace standpoint, for all those guys that we mentioned, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, is role players typically don't travel well in the playoffs. That's the saying in the NBA. Certainly the Mavericks role players didn't travel as well. Game 2 is in Oklahoma City. We shall see if that holds true. Those role players didn't travel well to Game 3, I think, in New Orleans. There was a bench scoring differential there, but in the closeout game they did. We'll see. Cason Wallace, the only thing you can say about him is there's an embarrassment of riches for the Thunder, and he could be starting for some teams. He
absolutely
could.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about bench players traveling and how will they impact 3 and 4. We don't know where the series is going to be at that point. Still got a game 2 on Thursday night to get through. But the thing about the bench players that the Thunder have, because they aren't just one-dimensional players, they do have top-line strengths, things that you would say, okay, this is what this guy is best at. But they all play pretty good defense. Some of them, their defense is their best thing about them. And so, while Jalen Williams, Arkansas Jalen Williams coming off the bench, Cason Wallace, those guys might not score a bunch in games, but defensively, they're not gonna lose much. You're still gonna get their defensive effort, their defensive prowess. So yeah, I agree. I think, because of the depth that Oklahoma City has, that advantage, you expect them to get some points that, will be, maybe, I don't know, skew the game, but you feel like they can get a point differential too on the bench from Dallas. But as much as anything, if those guys can come out and continue to defend, especially if somebody like Dort finds himself in some foul trouble again, that can happen when you're guarding Luka. It can happen when you're guarding Kyrie. So it could happen again for the Thunder. So to be able to have some options off the bench that aren't just, oh God, let's see what happens here. It's actually a good option. I think that's a positive for the Thunder.
An excellent point, Jenni. Whenever we think about that saying, role players don't travel, we look at the stats on the back of the bubblegum card, as our good friend Sam Prestigiacomo says. We look at points.
Yeah.
We don't look at the defensive contribution. And in this case, those guys defend consistently. So that old the saying might not hold up.
Well, a guy that off the bench, I'm not sure, in the same way I don't know if Giddey's role is much in this series. Gordon Hayward, we saw him play 7 minutes last night. He only played 4 in the game 4 against the Pelicans. Not big minutes, but is there any sense of what the heck's going on with why Gordon Hayward even gets 7 minutes when you see what Aaron Wiggins does, what Isaiah Joe does, these other options off the bench? Do we have a sense of, what explains time for Gordon Hayward at this point?
Mark Daigneault got into a conversation the other day in a scrum that I was at. I saw you were standing right next to him when he said it. Somebody asked him if he lied. And you're always honest with players. You're always honest with players. And he says,
yeah.
Do you never lie? And I think he said something like, yeah, I lied. I lie sometimes. I'm not always telling the truth. And he has not said there's not a lot of truth telling when it comes to the reasons why Gordon Hayward is playing. We don't know why. It's obviously not production. It's not on the bubblegum card. These stats must be like deep stats that Gordon Hayward is creating that are unseen. I think it might have something to do with chemistry. I think it might have something to do with the size, perhaps. There's some size matchups. He doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, he just doesn't. But it doesn't look like on the other end he's getting exploited. He might be there for all of his rotations, and that's just all they need.
Yeah.
It's not apparent to me or any of the untrained eyes on this team why he's playing, but it also isn't our national nightmare.
Right.
You got to have something to complain about, and I suppose this is it. It's a curiosity. I would love to meet Mark Daigneault over a beer in 10 or 15 years and say, oh, by the way, what was all that about? But it's a really when you're winning by 22 and he's playing 7 minutes, it's a trivial pursuit.
Yeah. And I think what you said about, if he doesn't do anything egregiously wrong and he gives somebody else 7 or 8 minutes to sit on the bench and recharge, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I think it is a curiosity because he just doesn't feel as free flowing when he's out there. So I don't know how those minutes are going to look by the end of this series. I don't know where it's going to go. I do think Mark Daigneault, in the same way, he was talking about seeing what they had with some of those interior looks. You sort of want to keep your cards open. You don't think you're going to need Gordon Hayward to play a bunch of minutes, but just in case, maybe 4 minutes here, 7 minutes there keeps him engaged enough. So if you do have to break glass if necessary, it's not like he's been on the bench for the last 3 weeks. So that may be as much of it too as anything.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
All right, game 2 coming Thursday night. Time for predictions, Sherm. What do you think about game 2 with, we know that changes get made, adjustments get made after the first game. What's your best guess about game 2?
Kyrie Irving took 14 shots last night. 14. That doesn't seem like a high usage rate for Kyrie Irving. He never really got unleashed. That's 14 shots in 37 minutes. He was 50% from the field, 3 of 4 from 3-point. So, I think there's a chance of a Kyrie Irving, more of a role, especially if Luka really is dragging. It maybe the playmaking role goes more to Irving. Really, Luka had the ball, and he was kicking to Irving. So I think that's the counter. I don't see that being enough. This whole sandwich thing, your stars are playing better than their stars, and your bench is considerably better than their bench.
Right.
I don't see that dynamic changing enough to make it a whole but I do think a Kyrie Irving game and an explosion is something that could happen. And I think the Thunder will win another 22-point win. We are headed down Timberwolves Denver Boulevard. What's your thought, Jenni?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see another double-digit win by the Thunder just because, again, it feels like they've just got more options at their fingertips to do. I think it is going to take some hero situations by Kyrie probably because it doesn't look like Luka is physically in a place where he can, activate and get after it the way that you would think. So I think Kyrie is going to have one of those explosive stretches where he just really puts the team on his back. And it's entirely possible. We didn't see it yesterday on Tuesday night where he just had one of those times where you thought, oh God, everything he does is going to go down. So I'm curious to see if he really gets in a rhythm. What does the Thunder do? Do they take Lu Dort and put him over there? Do they change up some matchups? We didn't really see that last night because it wasn't needed. Jalen Williams did a fine job on Kyrie Irving. So they just kept things pretty solid. Now they switched some screens more than they did against New Orleans, or maybe Dallas forced their hand in that way. But we saw some of that a little bit more. But I'd be curious to see if Kyrie really gets going. What do? Do they switch Dort off? Do they bring him over onto Kyrie to try to cool him off? Or do they stick with what they're doing and just see what happens? That's, to me, is going to be a fascinating thing because I think it's going to happen. I think Kyrie's too good of an offensive player to not have a stretch where everybody's jaws just dropping because he's out there putting everything in he throws towards the basket.
Editor's note, I don't think, I'm looking at the counter, 44 minutes and 33 seconds, the name Chet Holmgren got mentioned. Is that right? I have to check the transcript. Maybe early in this episode, but we've taken for granted that Chet Holmgren's going to be him. The 3-pointers, the defending at the rim, the body work he's doing on the big guys. I think that's a reason why there is a throttle on everyone else. He allows Dort and everybody else to be uber aggressive on the perimeter defending those folks because he can do what few others can. And I think that's also keeping a lid on Kyrie Irving. The Kyrie Irving show that he put on in the first round against the Clippers, that double pump shot that he got up over 3 arms, he's not getting that over Chet. He's just not. Chet is getting a hand on a lot of stuff. So maybe he goes off, but Chet's always lurking.
Next time we'll build in a Chet Holmgren appreciation segment into our show. So there you go. Next time we'll get that done. But that's all the time we've got for now. We've got all sorts of Thunder content at selloutcrowd.com. You can find columns, videos, podcasts there, as well as on our mobile app. Maybe even have some Maryland stories. Who knows? But that mobile app, download it today if you don't already have it. If you want our content sent straight to your inbox, we got you covered there too. Sign up for our newsletters. It's free. It's easy. Just head to selloutcrowd.com and opt in. This happens to be your first time hearing or watching us. I promise we won't have as much Maryland content next time. But be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.